Welcome to the Freelance Unlocked Podcast, hosted by me, Haley Davidson. I quit my corporate marketing job at 23 to freelance full-time. Since then, I've tripled my income, worked just 20 hours per week or less, and get to work from anywhere in the world. But like many new freelancers, when I first got started, I was underpaid, overworked, and disrespected by clients. In this podcast, you're going to learn how I turned the tables and unlocked true freedom and started living my dream life through freelancing. And here's a spoiler alert. My success started from the inside out. I'm so glad you're here. Now let's get started. Welcome to the Freelance Unlocked Podcast. I'm here with David Ebner. I'm just super excited to be here. David and I met through a mutual connection on LinkedIn. And David is the author and the president of Content Workshop. In 2013, he assembled a co-op of freelance writers whose sole purpose was to use their storytelling skills to help brands. Now, David spends most of his time writing Content Workshop and helping freelancers find a path to the lifestyle they want. And I really connected with David because we share a passion, obviously, for helping make freelancing better. And David just has so much wisdom to share from his years. You've been running the agency for over 10 years now, right? So I'm just really thrilled to have you here. I think everyone's going to really appreciate the conversation we're going to have today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Haley. And I'll just add at the top here that I believe that wisdom is just, failing over time. So everybody out there who's thinking wisdom, wow, I want some wisdom to be imparted. If you're failing right now, you are accruing wisdom as you go. So don't feel bad about it.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I was actually at a workshop today all about how to avoid overthinking. And I think the main takeaway was just go out there and fail and take action
Yeah.
because that's the only way you can learn,
Yeah,
especially as a freelancer.
That's right. That's great advice.
Yeah, definitely. Well, David, as we get started, I'd love to just hear a little bit more about your background, kind of your freelancing story. How did you get into the freelance world in the beginning and then develop your agency? You want to just tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, sure. No problem. I don't know if there is like a standard path to freelancing. I think everybody has their own journey, right? But I got my undergrad degree from the University of South Florida in creative writing. After I graduated, I had a couple of odd jobs. It was December of 2008, not like the best time to have an arts degree and graduate from college. They weren't just handing out jobs, right? So I did a lot of odd jobs, but finally decided to take a job as a traveling consultant, which took me all over the country. And it was fantastic. But also, I was at a lot of college campuses and I realized how much I missed going to school. So I went back to school to get my MFA in creative writing. So I went even further down, like the fine
Yeah,
arts
very
rabbit hole.
useful.
Yes, totally, right? But it was instantly as taking on grad school that I realized I needed to start working on a side hustle, right?
Mhm.
And that was freelance copywriting for me. I
Yeah.
was embarking on a master's degree in storytelling. I had some skill sets in writing already, right? You write a
Yeah,
lot when you study creative writing, um,
certainly.
obviously.
Yeah.
So I started freelancing, and it was right about that time that I realized pretty quickly that I could garner higher wages. I could do more work if it wasn't just me alone. That if I brought some people in, and even under the guise of it was a company, sure, but like in name only, like that, and I think that's probably where a lot of freelancers start anyway. But we kind of took it wholeheartedly, and it grew from there. And here we are, 11 years later, running an actual agency. I tell people we're just a bunch of storytellers disguised as a marketing agency. Calling ourselves an agency allows us to get the gigs that are fun for us. So that's that
Yeah.
was that was my journey.
That's amazing, and I think that's so needed because anyone that's worked in the corporate world or worked in marketing for a long time, I think especially now in 2024, we're all so tired of, like, marketing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so to hear you say, like, you guys are storytellers, I think that's so powerful and probably sets you apart that your passion is truly there instead of just trying to, like, be this marketer persona, you know what I mean? I'm curious if you remember how you got your first ever freelancing gig. I know it was a long time ago, but
Yeah, it was a while ago. I'm not that old, no, it was like 11, 12 years ago. Yeah, I think it was actually at the time I had a full-time copywriting job when I started
Oh,
when I was
okay.
in grad school too. It just wasn't enough money. It was never enough money, right? They just don't pay copywriters enough.
Do not.
That's a whole separate conversation, right? But, I was at working this place full time and a guy who worked with me came up to me and said, "Hey, my buddy is launching a company. He needs some copy for his website. Are you interested in like some side work?" And that's when I realized like everybody where I worked did this. And I was like the last one to the trough. And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So I just threw out a ridiculous number for how much it would cost. I just completely, flew by the seat of my pants, failed through the whole thing, but it ended up turning out fine and, got a paycheck. And then I realized, obviously that's something that can be duplicated over time.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think that's how a lot of people end up doing it is through a friend
Mhm.
or something random like that, and then you see how much money you can make, and that's, like, when you realize, "Okay, this freelancing thing could work for me."
Yeah, it's like you're making money with your mind. And
Yes,
that's the big part of it. I mean, it's obviously it's your time too, and that's not the
sure.
most scalable thing. We'll talk about that more, I'm sure, later. But just the fact that, somebody's paying me for my thoughts, essentially. Now
Yes.
I have to be able to translate them from here to here. And that's probably the magic, right? But
Yeah.
it's exciting.
Yeah, I think for me, what was really cool when I started freelancing was I don't know if you felt this way, but I felt like I had a lot more respect almost, and I felt more valued because, especially if you're a creative person, it's just so different working with a client as a freelancer, as someone who's maybe considered a specialist versus when I was in the corporate world, I was the typical marketer who's expected to
Mhm.
do everything and you're just seen as an employee. And then I felt like I was really able to flex my skills as a freelancer. I don't know if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. I mean, you have the vulnerability of being on your own, but the autonomy of being in charge of everything. So like
Yes.
it's a mixed bag for sure, but it's definitely empowering.
Yeah, lots of pros and cons for sure.
Mhm.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and I actually think that transitioned us very well to my next thing I wanna discuss, which was kind of like our thoughts on some freelance myths. So, there are a lot of myths we could discuss, there are a lot of things we could talk about here, but what I would love to start with is money. We're already talking about money. So, one thing David and I had already discussed in the previous conversation was this idea that everyone on social media these days is promoting $30,000 months, six-figure years, all of which are really great things. Obviously, we all want to make money, but there's this whole other side of it where we also, most of us got into freelancing because we wanted that respect from clients, but we also wanted free time. We wanted work life balance. And a lot of people struggle to they think they have to make a certain amount of money, so then they
Mhm.
sacrifice the work-life balance, or they have the work-life balance and then they're not making any money. So, let's talk about that. What are your thoughts,
I
David?
mean, yeah, it's the biggest myth in all freelancing, I think. It's the get rich quick scheme, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's really sad because there's a vulnerable population of people who really more than anything, even if they need to make money, they're really looking for freedom. Everybody's
Yeah.
looking for freedom, and money just is a signifier, a symbol of that freedom. If I have more money, I can make more autonomous decisions. Well, really, you're trying to get more autonomous decisions, and how you get there is I don't wanna say irrelevant, but, like, that's the end goal. It's the juice is the juice worth the squeeze? Does the ends justify the means, right? And
Yeah.
this is the big one, and it's because it's promoted so widely, I think, Haley.
Yeah.
There's tons of people out there telling you how they've struck it rich and you can too. It's prospecting, essentially. It's the
Yeah.
same as finding a bunch of gold in the river in, 1949 in San Francisco, right? But yeah, it is a myth, and I think it's not impossible. It's
Mhm.
not impossible to make $30,000 a month or to make, $100,000 a year as a freelancer.
Yeah.
It's very rare for that to happen. It's almost impossible for it to happen without a certain amount of effort that goes
Yes.
into it, and very few people get to that point without having help. Whether that's an advisor, a consultant, or literally working with other people, like in an agency in name only function.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's really the pathway to actually reaching those goals. I mean,
Yeah.
again, there's people who've done it. Like there are people who have done it, but I think it's important to note that one of my coworkers said this the other day that story kicks facts ass.
Mm.
So a story is better than the facts, and we will always follow the story first. You just have to like read the news. Well, what used to be the newspaper, right? Or like any news site to realize that that is true.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that's the myth for sure.
I 100% agree with you, and I think what gets lost when people are trying to tell a story or when they are trying to just promote their own programs that they're trying to sell or prospecting, as you said, I think that's a really accurate way to look at it, is people get caught up in the numbers or in the lifestyle and they don't pause to think about how they want to feel. So whenever I work with freelancers one-on-one sometimes, and whenever we start working together, I always tell them like, let's not worry about the money. Let's think about how you want to feel and then go from there. Because if you just want to feel free to spend time with your kids, to go on vacation, to not get like Teams messages all day. I don't know if you ever
Yeah.
use Teams, but I still get triggered when I hear that that ping. Well,
Yeah.
then maybe the amount of money that you need to make or the kind of work you need to do, it doesn't have to be what you think that everyone is saying you need to do. And so this has actually been a huge discussion with me and my friends, because especially when it comes to women, I think there's a lot of messaging around there that teaches them not to like trust themselves
Mhm.
or to make their own decisions in a way. So it's just like this default programming of you need to make all this money or you need to do it this way. So
Yeah,
I
you're absolutely right. There's no question. And maybe this might be getting a little deeper than we need to, but there's probably something in us as whether old or young millennials, probably everybody is a millennial at this point in time if they're doing this. I don't know if the next generation has gotten to the age that they
There's some
start
Gen
realizing
Z there's
a
some
couple of
Gen
Gen Zers,
Zers.
but they're in the
Yeah.
same boat too. And there was at one point our parents, they kind of lived a life that no longer exists for us, right? They lived the pension, they lived the same place you work for 20 years. The company will take care of you if you are loyal.
Yeah.
That 2008, 2009, 2007, that time period, it imploded all of that, right? So, I could literally, right when I graduated from college, like we were somewhat sold a lie. Like this
Yeah.
world that we were brought into did not exist anymore. So I think that's why freelancing and kind of the model of making it on your own, the grit that it takes, the hustle is appetizing to us because it's all
Yeah.
we've really known. But also there's some lingering concepts and like structures that we're still dealing with, which is how much your worth is tied to how much money you make. There's some sort of number goal that you're supposed to be trying to work toward,
Yeah.
opposed to really that lifestyle that we've talked about. So I don't know.
Yeah, just the way you
That's
wanna feel. No, that's such a good way to put it. I never even thought about it that way, but you're right. It's like, maybe a lot of us grew up hearing our parents say, "Well, the end goal is to earn 6 figures," or "The end goal is to have that house," or whatever, but it's like, a lot of us don't want that anymore. So many people, they just wanna feel free to travel or do whatever it is. So, yeah, we're on the same page about that.
yeah, for sure.
The other thing is sort of related, but something that we had talked about previously that is also really important is the idea that you sort of touched on this, but the fact that maybe you can make 6 figures as a freelancer, but to do that, you do need to have a team in most cases. And I just wanted to mention that again because I think it's really important for people to ask themselves what they want out of their freelance career. So a lot of people I talk to in my freelance community, they kind of ended up where they're at. So they ended up as an agency and now they hate working with these contractors.
Yeah.
Now they hate working with these kind of clients. And I feel like I've avoided that by being super intentional. So with every client I take on and every move I make, but that can be really tough when you have a lot of potential clients coming in, a lot of potential work. So I'd actually love to ask you if you have advice for people who feel like they're kind of caught up in that cycle where they're just
Yeah.
falling into they think they have to be an agency. How do you actually stop that, roller or not snowball effect, I guess, and get clear on what you want and make intentional moves in your business?
Yeah, I think the number one goal that I had when I really kind of like got content workshop moving was that I didn't need to get rich. I think that's really important to know that what you're trying to get out of what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And that gives you again the autonomy to make the decisions you need to make. We don't take clients that we're not interested in. We
Mhm.
don't just take anybody who comes across the pipeline, right? Um, we attract a certain type of brand
Yeah.
that is appealing to us, which is great. So we don't have to say no a whole lot, but sometimes we do. And the only reason we can really do that is that our underlying goal is not a financial one. Now, of course, we
Mhm.
do want to make money. We want everybody to be comfortable. Everybody's, should be able to make a living wage that works
Yeah.
with us. But if we're striving to do things that are greater than what we can achieve today, we're going to start making decisions that are the antithesis of our values. So
Mhm.
we've got to just be careful about that as a person, as a business.
Yeah.
Really the person is the business when you're a freelancer, right? So it's all the same thing. So I
Yeah.
think it's just that's one thing. Having a scarcity mindset when it comes to expenses, but
Mhm.
an abundance mindset when it comes to opportunity, I think is important too.
Ah.
And what I mean by that is keep your expenses as low as possible because
Mhm.
that'll stop you from having to make decisions that are again the opposite of what the direction you want to go.
Yeah.
Whether that's personally or for the business, right? I think in Content Workshop, I worked full time for many years while Content Workshop was running in the back.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, for many years, and
Oh.
I climbed the corporate ladder, and I was an executive in marketing and stuff, but I kept pulling myself back to content, and I was
Yeah.
running this like secondary agency while working full time back when I was pulling 12-hour days and stuff. But
Yeah.
our expenses at Content Workshop were under $1,000 a month. Like our total
Wow.
like outline, not including like, contractors and staffing,
Sure.
but we kept everything as low as possible. And literally at that time, I was just taking at the end of the month, whatever money was over $1,000 in the bank account and just, paying myself with that. I didn't pay myself
Yeah.
otherwise, right? So some months were really good and some months like but having that kind of like scarcity mindset around expenses was what afforded me to make all those decisions.
Mm.
And I think it's also important to that abundance mindset around opportunity.
Yeah.
You want to live like you have no money. Like that's usually not a fun way to live. I mean, we've all done it at some point in time,
Agreed.
you know, but you have to envision yourself being successful before you can actually be successful, right?
Yeah.
It's manifesting 101. And, my wife and I, we talk about manifesting all the time. She has made me a true believer. And she
Wow.
believes a little bit more in kind of like the magic side of manifesting. I don't.
Sure.
Like I'm too analytical for that. But
Okay.
if you know how you want to feel, if you
Yeah.
know that freedom lifestyle you want to have, and you just take a second and think about like how you'll feel when you have that full freedom, not the money in your bank account, but like being able to make your own decisions and saying no sometimes and whatever it is,
Mhm.
or going on that vacation.
Yeah.
If you start doing that on a regular basis, when decisions come up or activities happen in your daily life, you'll start making decisions and actions toward that end goal. You'll start to see small little opportunities here and there that are in that direction. And then you just
Yeah.
start taking them. Again, I don't think the universe gives it to us. I don't believe in that part. But if you're thinking about it all the time, if you're putting yourself in that mantra of abundance, you're
Mhm.
gonna start to see little, I guess it's like little signs in the road, right?
Yeah.
Like turn left here, or
Well,
whatever it may be.
yeah, what I call it is like you're embodying the identity of the person you wanna be, and so if you're doing that embodiment, like you said, you're taking a moment to feel the feelings. I ask myself every day, "What would I do if" I know it's not about the money, but it helps me.
Mhm.
I'm like,
Yep.
"If I already was making $1,000,000 a year," or whatever the goal is, well, then how would I act today? What decisions would I make today? How would I approach this conversation with a client? That's like a huge thing, it the opportunities will show up when you're focusing on how you wanna feel, but also you'll create the opportunities
Mhm.
because the way you communicate and project yourself to potential clients and to people you meet will be so different. Like, a huge struggle that I know a lot of people listening have is boundaries.
Yeah.
You can't have boundaries with anyone, but especially with clients if you are having a scarcity mindset when it comes to opportunities.
Mhm.
And I don't think, I think you do have to take on jobs that are not the best in the beginning
Yep.
sometimes.
Oh,
But if you always sacrifice your boundaries, you always sacrifice what you want, then you're not going to build that business that you really want. You're not going to become that person that you want to be. So I'm a big believer in manifestation also. By the way, I believe in the spiritual side of it too.
it's fine. You and my wife can have many conversations about it.
But I've read a lot about the quantum physics side of it, which
I mean, listen, there are a million reels in my Instagram right now from her about that.
Oh, from your wife?
From my wife. She just sends me
That's hilarious.
reels about anyway, it's not the purpose of this conversation, but still
Sure.
interesting.
No, and it's a big part of it, right? Because I think, the big takeaway for everyone is it's about embodying that identity and pinpointing that feeling that you wanna have, and then focus on that, not so much on the money and all those things. So, yeah, I think we covered that topic pretty well.
Yeah.
So, are there any other myths that you wanted to touch on before we moved on?
I think honestly, I think that's the biggest one.
Yeah, I
And if
agree.
if you take away anything, I think it's just a realistic approach to what you're trying to achieve, but
Hmm.
still knowing that everybody who's ever done anything, the first time anything was ever done, it had never been done before that, right?
Yeah.
They talk about this 4-minute mile, right? If there's everybody was trying to like say it was impossible for somebody to break a 4-minute mile. Then somebody did it. And then it was broken 4 times like the next month. So,
Wow.
it's important to know that even though you need to be grounded in reality with what you're trying to accomplish and probably more your personal goals in it, just
Yeah.
because you're being realistic doesn't mean you shouldn't, look past and try to do something that no one has ever done before, right?
Yeah, you have to be grounded in the present moment and be very realistic. That's why I love what you said about the expenses too. Because I think when I first started freelancing, I was too far on the side of the dreamer that, I wanted to break the 4-minute mile and I thought everything would catch up with me. So I think my expenses inflated quite a
Yeah.
bit. And
Yeah.
I was already trying to live the lifestyle. I was already trying to live like I manifested it, even though I had
I
it.
know.
And then once I pulled it back and I realized, like, actually, that version of me who's already really successful, they're a responsible person. They take care of their money. They do
Mhm.
stick to a budget. They do whatever it is. That's when my financial situation really changed
Mhm.
is so that's why it's just so important to think about the identity part and the feelings. So you got to have a little bit of both. Be
That's right.
grounded in the present moment and dream big. So let's talk about now advice for new freelancers. And I want to talk about this specifically in terms of you as a client because you run an agency. How many freelancers do you guys usually have working for you at any given time? A lot.
It's a lot, yeah.
Yeah. And so you have so much experience hiring freelancers. And so, as the founder of an agency, let's talk
Yeah.
about some of the biggest mistakes that you see people make when they're applying.
I think there's an issue with skill versus experience a lot with freelancers, with anybody applying for any job. But,
Yeah.
great people will look past experience and look to skill in hiring.
Mhm.
They'll say, you might have never done this before, but you've done this thing over here, which is translatable whether you know it or not. So we're going to help you apply that skill in this way. And actually, when we started Content Workshop, we exclusively hired people with MFAs in creative writing
Oh,
because that was our background. We got 3 or 4 that work here today, and then, like, a lot of our contractors have them. And the reason being is that we knew that they had storytelling skills. Most of them had never freelanced a day in their life,
mhm.
but we just showed them easy steps to how to use those storytelling skills over in a commercial way.
Yeah.
And it was great because most of them, for the first time ever, making money on their writing. So they're
Mhm.
very excited about it, even though it wasn't their end goal
Yeah.
to do this type of work, right? So I think it's important to highlight your skills if you don't have the experience.
Mhm.
With that being said, and you'll apply for a ton of gigs that you won't get. You won't get almost all of them. You have
Yeah.
to have a super thick skin if you're gonna do this work. You have to have a thick skin to do the work itself. The
Yeah.
rejection that comes with actually just getting the gig is
You
really tough.
you need really, really thick skin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's honestly as a we as creative writers, we would submit short stories that we wrote. Most were semi-autobiographical to a group of 10 people, and they all would, like, shred them apart. So that was a
Wow.
really great training for being a freelancer. That not that everybody should have to go through that.
Yeah.
I'll say, like, promote your skills,
Mhm.
that's important, but don't apply for a job you're clearly not qualified for.
Yeah.
I am going through right now, we're constantly trying to hire freelance copywriters constantly.
Yeah.
So I posted a job for a cybersecurity freelance copywriter that we need badly. The area of our business is blowing up. We need a lot of writers.
Yeah.
A lot of people are saying they're qualified when they're not. So I'm getting a lot of messages that are like, hey, I've written all of these things. I really don't have a deep understanding or bench in this very technical field. And
Right.
in most fields, if you're a good enough writer and you're curious and
Mhm.
you love to research, you can probably write about most things.
Yeah.
Deep tech, cybersecurity, this is not one of those, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's important to know what those fields are. I would build a list of industries that you feel very comfortable working in, the ones that
Mhm.
are kind of a bit of a stretch, and then also go ahead and put in a list of the ones that are just don't make any sense for you. Stay out of those because they're just not going to. They're going to be all rejection and a lot of waste of time. But feel free to stretch yourself a little bit, and if you're going to stretch yourself, promote your skill. So saying something like, I haven't written specifically an article like this, but I have this other one that's similar. And I think you'll see that the voice will carry over. The subject matter expertise is very similar, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, promote that skill first would be my recommendation.
And I think even in that example, like you said, you can even share about your process. So like something that I tried to get into for a while was like thought leadership writing. So sometimes, a lot of times companies looking for someone who can interview their executives and then write on their behalf. And I didn't have much experience doing that. But when I would apply for those roles, I could always say, well, I did interview people for this article and this was my process and here's the outcome of that. I also agree with what you said. I think a lot of people I'm in all these Facebook groups where people post, like, jobs or they're hiring for freelancers, and you always see those people who comment on every single one,
Yeah.
and it's like, how do we know which one you're qualified for, right, if you're just going after it? So I think that advice that you said about writing down the industries that make sense for you and then giving yourself the ability to say no to some of them, have that list written down so you don't waste time because that's why so many freelancers end up burnt out. They
Mhm.
end up feeling like they're constantly being rejected because they think that they should just apply to everything, and
Yeah.
it doesn't work.
I would not suggest applying to everything because what you'll
No.
also do is burn bridges, right?
Yeah.
There are a number of people who've applied for jobs with us in the past, and we've gotten to the point where we needed like them to write a test article for us.
Yeah.
We always pay people for if you are applying for a job and they're not paying you for the tryout, run, just
Red
run in
flag.
the opposite direction. So anyway, we pay them to write a test article just so we can see how they're doing. They get the same amount whether we had hired them as a freelancer
Sure.
or not, and it's way off. And
Mm,
now, I connect with all of these people on LinkedIn and I can't help but remember that when I go to post another job, I've had some
yeah,
people apply multiple times. They're like, I wouldn't hire you now
yeah,
because of this experience we had. I hope the best for them, right? But
yeah.
it burns a bridge too, potentially. So you gotta be careful a little bit about
It
that.
does, and it also shows, like I think the thing that a lot of people look for is almost I don't know if you would consider this a soft skill, but, like, attention to detail. We were
Yeah.
just talking about this. So, if you post a cybersecurity role and you're clear in the job posting that this person needs to have a deep understanding of the industry, now someone else goes and applies for that, and they clearly don't have the experience. Well, it really looks like you just didn't read the job
Yeah.
posting. So now if another job comes up that they might be a good fit for, you are less likely to hire them because now you think that maybe they are not paying attention to detail or they didn't
Mhm.
thoroughly read the job posting or they're not trustworthy in that sense. So it's very important to just apply for those roles in
Yeah,
the right
that's
way.
right.
Yeah, 100%. What about during the hiring process? Like something I notice a lot is that some freelancers just are not great at communicating. Do you have any tips for during the hiring process? Like, how should they be following up? Like, how much follow up is too much? Does it look bad if they never follow up? The answer is yes, in my
Yeah.
opinion. But I want to
Yeah.
hear you say it. You got more experience, and I tell people all the time follow up.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little
There's
bit.
nothing wrong. I mean, you have to think of yourselves as working in a sales job, right? And partially, I wish everybody had some sort of experience in a sales job before they went to freelance, right?
Yeah.
Selling is just helping too.
Mm,
I know it's a big thing that a lot of freelancers don't want to do because they don't see themselves in that role or they don't have
mm,
that personality. They think there is a personality for sales. There's not.
right. There's
It,
not.
it just offer to help. And that is all selling is. Sometimes the you can help them by them hire like actually your services. Other
Yeah.
times, there's just other things you can do to help them, right?
Yeah.
So if you start to think about that, that's a little bit easier. But you also have to think in a sales mindset that time kills all deals.
Mm,
Enough time passes, it doesn't matter how perfect the fit is, it's dead.
yep.
So don't be overzealous and message them every day. That's annoying, right? But I think it's fair to say if you've reached out about something and you started a communication with that person,
Mhm.
if you've never connected with that person, whether they've exchanged an email or whatever it may be, I wouldn't keep pursuing them
No.
ad nauseum, right? Maybe wait a few days, a week, follow up
Yeah.
again. After that, I would just drop it and move on. But if you've connected with somebody and they've asked you for something or you've exchanged some information, every couple of days, I would reach out and just an easy ping. Hey, I was thinking about you this morning. Just wondering if you had any thoughts about this.
Yeah.
More times than not, people are just busy and forgot.
Mhm.
I am actively hiring right now. We had like 800 people apply for this job, and
Wow.
I went through application on
Oh my
LinkedIn. And it's
gosh.
really tough. And I feel really bad because some people applied like right when I was in there. So I
Mm.
immediately like rejected them.
Oh
And
no.
one person was like, "Whoa, you rejected me within 5 seconds. Like, why?" I'm like, "You just were you just happened to apply." I'm sorry if I felt really bad about that.
Yeah,
It's no
it
reflection on
happened.
them. But when you're going through 800 applications, and if as freelancers, there's probably a huge pool of people applying. People are making snap judgments really fast because they have to get through all of them, right?
Yeah.
However, there's some people who it could be days before I come back to something. And I ask people to send me samples. And then, sometimes 4 or 5 days have gone and they haven't sent the samples yet. And by the time they do, I'm moved on.
Yeah.
So it's important to like, if you agree to do something, and even if you can't reach out right away, set a time period. Say, that's great. I've got a lot going on the next couple of days. Can I get it to you by Wednesday?
Yeah.
They're going to say yes, right? Like it's a great way to reach out. I'll also say on that note, if you're following up about something, offer something, right?
Yes.
So, when you follow up and you've already sent your samples, first off, don't send the samples and just say, talk to you later. Send the samples and say, hey, here are my samples. Are you free whatever 2 or 3 days is later for us to jump on a quick call to talk through them? Always ask for something else at that point.
Yes. Get
And
that
when you're
reply.
exactly. And when you're
Yeah.
reaching out because you haven't heard from them, offer them something else. Oh, I found this other sample that I thought you might be interested in reading, and share that as well too. There's nothing wrong. Or I saw that you guys posted on LinkedIn about Valentine's Day. I thought your post was really cute.
Yeah.
Or something. Like you have to offer something other than you have to have a reason for reaching out that's not just, hey, I won something from you.
Yeah.
I think that helps quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think because it's about relationships at the end of the day. And maybe it's not as much about relationships in a well, it is when you're hiring in a corporate role, like, about relationships, but I think even more so in freelancing because the way that it is, like, you have to really build that relationship and follow up and take responsibility for that, and not see it as just a transaction. For me, when people are reaching out, we feel that as clients. Now I also hire freelancers, not as many as you guys, but
Yeah.
I feel it when someone just sees me as someone that can offer them something. And I don't like that feeling because I got into this to work with people who are cool and who I can have a relationship with. So, yeah, it's very important. I love to do the whole, "Oh, I saw this article, it made me think of
Yeah.
you" thing on LinkedIn or, if that person's ghosting you for a longer period of time, I love to just make sure I follow them on LinkedIn and engage
Mhm.
with their posts. It's like I always tell people, it's not dating. Like, don't take it personally. You're not getting
Yeah.
ghosted. It's just
Right.
people are just busy, right? Yeah. 100%. Do you have an example of one candidate, like, that really stood out to you, that really impressed you, and, like, what did they do? If you can't think of one, it's okay, but
Yeah, I'll tell you one, but I'll tell you, we didn't hire him,
oh,
because
this is gonna be a good
he
story
was
then.
he was too expensive.
Yes.
His resume and his experience was just very witty. As
Mm,
somebody who works with writers, I mean, we're talking about writing specifically now, but the same can be done on the graphic front, really any freelancing front, right? The
yeah.
people you're applying to work with are much like you.
Yeah.
They're creative people, they're excitable people. Give them something to be excited about.
Yeah.
Dry if you're applying to be a freelance copywriter and you produce a dry resume or dry messages, like I that is the first indicator that's not gonna work, right?
Yes.
So his resume had like anecdotal information next to all the places he worked, which was just fun stuff. I I
Yeah.
I can't think of an example right now, but he worked with some big brands. He was like, and I worked with Pepsi Cola, and then I swore off caffeine for the rest of my life. Was like the what came on like right underneath of what he did for the work. And like, hey, worked with YouTube. We just created some cool videos. It
Yeah.
was just simple like that. And I know you want to go out of your way to over explain your skills and experience, but
Mm,
if you don't stand out, you'll never get to that point, right?
yeah.
It's like an ad. Like a good
Mm,
ad is visual first, vocal second, right?
yeah.
So you have to be drawn in by the visuals or you'll never read the first line. And if the
Yeah.
first line's not great, you'll never read the second line. It's the
Yeah.
same thing with like an email, right? An email, if depending on who sends it, you're going to open it or not. Depending on the
Right.
subject line, you're going to open it or not. If the subject line doesn't match what the copy is in the body, you're going to leave. If
Yeah.
all of that works, you might get a click on the button, right? So it's about the stepping process.
Mhm.
So stand out, be creative, be witty, be funny,
Yeah.
be concise
Yeah.
is probably the best thing you can do.
Concise is good.
Yeah, concise
Very
is
good
good.
advice.
Where, the number one indicator of a writer that lacks confidence is overwriting.
Yes.
And I was very guilty of that early on in my career, working with a great editor. They kind of work that out of you over time, right? But, just be concise and be a little witty. I think that's
Yeah,
smart.
I love that. And I think, at the end of the day, most of the people who are in this freelancing world or who are writers, they are genuinely witty,
Yeah.
cool people. But sometimes when we get into these freelancing situations, it's like you said, they think they have to be a certain type of person or a certain personality as a salesperson or as someone who's marketing themselves. But I think just be yourself, but be the concise version of
Yeah.
yourself.
The most concise version of yourself is what you
Yes,
should be.
that's a good takeaway for everyone. I love that. So let's go back to what you said. So this guy was great, but he was a little expensive.
Yeah.
And this brings me to another topic that I really wanted to discuss, which was like the difference between working with an agency versus working directly with a client. So, I think everyone knows that when you work with an agency, you get a load off your plate because you don't have to deal with client management. You're more likely to get paid on time. It's just a lot easier. But then that means the trade off is you might get paid a little bit less.
Mhm.
So, could you tell me, like, from your perspective, what are some of the benefits of working with an agency and how can someone kind of evaluate that if they had to choose between working for an agency or trying to find clients who would pay more, what are some of the things that they could think about?
Yeah.
No.
Great question. I'll add at the top that every freelancer should obviously think of themselves as a business.
Yeah.
Every business, I don't care what business it is, has multiple streams of revenue.
Mhm.
You do not get all of your money from one place.
Yeah.
That's actually a big liability, right?
Yeah.
You want to have multiple streams. That means multiple clients, but also means multiple types of clients. So if you're a freelancer, getting your own business is going to be pivotal because that's where you'll make your highest margin. You'll get
Mhm.
lower margin, but it'll be repeatable. It'll be more consistent, and it's going to be a steady stream from an agency.
Mm.
So my suggestion is always go the mixed bag route. Do a little bit of all of it. Now, eventually,
Yeah.
if you can garner a high enough rate, you can exit the agency concept and have enough confidence that you'll have a steady stream from all the other ones. That's perfectly fine. And this gentleman probably is already in that route, but he's applying for the things that he thinks are interesting and fun, right?
Yeah.
And that happens quite a bit. So, I can only speak to how our agency works. I cannot speak to other agencies, but we built Content Workshop as an agency for freelancers. We have a pretty small actual pool of employees here, and everybody else is a contractor or a freelancer, right? And we built it in the mindset of if Content Workshop existed before we started it, would we rather work there than try
Mhm.
to start a new company? And we want to build a company where we'd rather just work there.
Yeah.
And today I think we've done that, where if Content Workshop existed 11 years ago, I'd just be a writer here. I would love to just be a writer here and not do all of this other stuff. I would
Yeah.
absolutely love it, right? Our writers can work from anywhere at any time. We had writers that just travel internationally and didn't even tell us, and it doesn't matter. We don't
Yeah.
care. We could write from the moon from all we care, right? As long as the work is good and on time.
Yeah.
That's really all that matters.
Yeah.
So we take a lot off the writer's plate. So we said we were freelancers. And we're like, what are the worst parts of freelancing, right?
Mm.
Finding new business certainly is like the worst part of freelancing, in
Definitely.
my opinion.
I agree with you.
Second, to only chasing down invoices and getting paid. That is terrible.
Mhm.
And it's usually the length of time is bad. You're the last priority when you're a freelancer because
Yeah.
they don't feel like they have a whole lot of recourse, honestly.
Mhm.
And that's no shade on the businesses. They have to prioritize who they pay. They have to.
Yes.
And they're going to prioritize bigger bills from larger companies, particularly if they have an MSA that dictates certain terms before
Yeah.
they're going to pay a freelancer that probably has a weaker agreement with the company.
Mhm.
So that all makes sense. So those are terrible parts. So we're like, we'll definitely take that off their plate. Meeting with the clients, because most freelance copywriters, particularly the ones that we've met, are pretty, introverted. They don't want
Yeah.
they don't want to jump on a call. They don't want to go through all of that rigmarole if they
Right.
don't have to. So like, okay, well, let's take that off their plate.
Nice.
What the other piece is, for us, we build content by committee. We call it Content Workshop for a reason. We're literally a workshop. So we've built kind of
Wow.
this flat yet assembly line methodology to building content. Everybody has a say in the direction of the content. Everybody can make it better on that assembly line, but everybody
Yeah.
has a specific job.
Mhm.
So our writers, they get a brief handed to them with an outline that's already been approved by the client. We have the target keyword phrases in there. We have the persona information in there. We have resource links for them to consider. We have an SEO
Wow.
checklist already there. It's all in the document.
Yeah.
So a lot of work goes into all that. We do all the meetings with the clients. We do all of that. We just hand it to the writer and say, draft this. Draft
Mm.
it. You don't even have to write the perfect, just by doing all that work in the front end, though, too, we get the first draft can be 90% done.
Yeah.
That's the goal. And then we have a separate editor come through. Then there's a director review. Then it comes back to the writer for revision. All of that is before the client ever even sees it.
Mm.
So for them, they're usually done at that point because they've done such a good job of prepping
Yeah.
and doing the work that their core competency is, which is writing, that by the time the client sees it, if they have edits, they're so minor that the
Mm.
client will just make them themselves, or
Yeah.
our team internally is just like, yeah, we're not going to bother the writer again
Of
with that,
course.
right? So anyway, we take all of that off their plate. All they have to do is get their assignments and get them done on time and do a good job and be vocal when they're not going to be on time or they think there's a better direction. So anyway, that's what working with us is like. Again, I don't think every agency does it that way.
No.
I'll say that, like, for me at least, we do some white label work with other agencies too. And I'll tell
Mhm.
you, like, we've worked with some agencies that are very difficult to work with.
Yeah.
I think there's also a power struggle of who's in charge.
Sure.
And we're very flat here. Like,
Mhm.
everybody's bringing their skills to the table. We want to hear everybody's opinion, certainly.
Yeah.
But we've worked with agencies where everything is on fire all the time. Due dates are unrealistic.
Yeah.
If I haven't heard about something and you want it in under 5 days, that's unrealistic.
Yeah.
Particularly for a freelancer too. We
Yeah.
never ask our freelancers to do anything that they're just now hearing about in fewer than 7 days.
Mm.
And if that doesn't work, they can just ping us, be like, yeah, that I can't make that happen. We'll just give it to somebody else.
Yeah.
So, working with an agency where everything seems to be on fire, everything's urgent. I need something right now. You need to be available at specific hours of the day. That stuff gives me anxiety.
Does.
So we try to build a methodology that would be in their favor,
Yeah.
so that they'd be willing to work with us as a steady stream of revenue, knowing that they could go out and make more if they wanted to do all those steps that I just mentioned that, we take over.
Yeah. So I think my two biggest takeaways from all that thank you for sharing that. It's really helpful. I think it's going to give people such a great perspective of what it's like to work with an agency. Is working with agencies is great and it can be a great way to diversify your revenue, but look for those red flags.
Yeah.
Like, I think a lot of people, including me, used to assume that working with an agency meant you had to put up with the on fire all the time attitude. It meant you had to put up with being, on the clock at certain hours, or you had to get paid hourly. I did that when I first started freelancing. And that's when I was like, I made a big sweeping statement. I think I even put it on my Instagram where I was like, no one should work with agencies anymore. With agencies, don't do it.
Yeah.
And then I got a contract with, a really established, incredible creative agency here in Atlanta. And I was like, wait, working with an agency can be this easy and this fun. And they can do all the hard work with the client and I can just do what I do.
Mhm.
So you definitely have to, just like any other client, like, understand the red flags and look out for that. The other thing that I really love about what you said is how you guys take almost like the scoping out of the project off the plate, which is a huge struggle for so many freelancers and is in fact a skill itself. Wouldn't you
Yeah.
agree? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
knowing how to define the scope of the project, knowing how to get approval in the early stages before you present a completed project, that's all a skill that takes time to learn. So if you can let someone else do that for you, it is worth a minor pay cut
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, because then you don't have scope creep, which is the after
Exactly.
effect of poor scoping, right? It's
Yeah.
like, oh man, this is actually going to cost us money. There has to be margin. There has to be margin all over the place, whether you as a freelancer or for an agency. We never, if we got it wrong, we eat that, right? Like, if
Yeah.
we got it wrong, we eat it.
Yeah.
But our margins aren't in such a way that that's detrimental. Like, we actually,
Mhm.
it's like loss prevention for Walmart, right? Like, you're gonna have a certain amount of shrinkage, right? You're
Yes.
gonna lose some items, right, along the way. and you have to factor for that. And we built, man, I'll tell you, like, I think the reason we're successful, one of the reasons is that not just the fact that we hire these fantastic writers that are great storytellers and
Hmm.
all that, but our process that we built of like how to work with freelancers and make it beneficial to them as well as
Yeah.
beneficial to us is really why we're successful. It's detailed, probably a little over detailed, to be honest. But even how we pay and how we've structured everything, like our
Yeah.
freelancers don't have to wait. Like they finish a month's worth of work, they're paid within 15 days. It's in their bank
Yeah.
account. Like we
Yeah.
put through a lot of effort to make that part easy too for them. And
Hmm.
again, and that's we've all been there. We've all done the freelance hustle where somebody decides not to pay you, or it just takes forever to get your pay, or you're just
Yeah.
uncomfortable asking for it. A lot easier
Yeah.
to send that reminder via QuickBooks than to write an email. Um,
Yeah.
so anyway, all that I'm not trying to like speak, lift us up above everybody else, but I think it's important to find an agency if you're going to work with one that really values what you bring to the table other than just a kind of like a cog, right? You're
Yeah.
bringing ideas to the table. And if they're interested in your ideas and your curiosity and have a platform in which for you to express them, they're
Yeah.
probably going to be fun to work with.
I agree. And, I think one of the questions that I ask myself all the time when I'm evaluating clients and trying to figure out if they're right for me is this better than my 9 to 5? Or is this like why I tried to leave my 9 to 5? Which I don't know if that's the best way to look at it. But I remember I was working with this agency for a while, but, and again, it's not just about agencies, but any client where I felt like I was being treated like that cog, or I was dealing with, the disrespect or whatever it was. And so I was like, I'm not gonna do this. This is not why I left my 9 to 5. And so that question just gave me a lot of clarity when I was deciding what kind of clients to work with.
Mhm.
And because it's hard. It's hard to evaluate a client before you sign on with them. And not all of us are always right. Sometimes you can
Yeah.
get a bad client and then you have to deal with it, right?
Yep. That's tough. That's tough.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, one other question about this for you as the person that is hiring freelancers is, where are you guys looking for freelancers in
Mm.
general? Like, you can talk about yourself specifically, or in general, how are agencies going about recruiting, looking for clients? Are they making job postings on LinkedIn? You looking in your network? Give me a
Yeah.
yeah.
We always post the job openings on LinkedIn hoping to find like the diamond in the rough, but honestly, we hardly ever find a candidate. Even if we have 7
Mhm.
or 800 applicants, we hardly ever find a candidate in there.
Wow.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
We find way more people in our network. Like
Mm,
that's how we started and it's how we've grown to this point is networking.
yeah.
Somebody refer a writer that we work with refers their friend. Like that is the
Yeah.
best the best person we'll get because they've already given them the rundown of how things work. We don't have to explain a whole lot to them. Well, we'll still
Right.
go through the process, but they get it.
Yeah.
We had one referral that came in and she provided some great information. One of the lady who referred her to us, she'd been working with us for years, and she had provided a sheet with like her rates and stuff on it. And her rates were pretty high. I'm like, oh man, I
Mm.
don't think we can match these. And I didn't even have to reply. She sent an email like not long after that was like, oh, by the way, just so you know, I have separate like agency rates. I'm like, I
Oh,
just
that's
knew
great.
that this probably wasn't gonna work. And that's something for maybe for the freelancers too to know, like you should have a standard rate. You should
Yeah.
have a standard rate. You should also, if you are interested in going the agency route, have an agency rate as well too.
Yes.
And then work with people
Mhm.
as it comes together.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think LinkedIn is tough. Job postings are tough. Even we don't even post jobs on our website anymore
Mm.
because we get so much junk. The number of junk form fills we get is unbelievable, and I fish through all of them.
Yeah.
So that's rough, but referral. So if you know other freelancers, let them know that you're looking.
Yep.
The number of times people have reached out to me said, "Hey, I work with so and so, and they're looking." That always starts a conversation.
100.
Yeah, let other people know what your goals are. The way I see it is if you share your goals with other people, sure, you may not reach them. And is that a little bit embarrassing? Only if you let it be. Embarrassing is an internal feeling, not an external one. So you can let it be or not, but you also have co-conspirators in your goal now.
Yeah.
Like if I tell you I'm trying to do X and you're going to think about it, it's the same thing as manifesting. You're going to think about it and you're going to see an opportunity for that. But David mentioned that I'm going to send him a message. And it's good to reach out to your network on a regular basis. Just pop up, be present with them. Whether that's
Yeah.
going to a networking event, those are fantastic.
Hmm.
I literally, we were just talking before we started that I flew to Atlanta yesterday just for a networking event and flew right back.
Yep.
And it just makes me feel good, but also a lot of, business does come from that.
It does.
So keep working that network. That's the best way to get them. And if, you know, if you've got, there's nothing wrong with touching base with people every month or 3 months and saying,
Yeah.
hey, how are things going with you? Obviously share, let them share. It's not a one-sided conversation, but,
Yeah.
and then, hey, I've got this new goal or new thing I'm trying to achieve. If you know somebody right now, great. Let me know if I can be helpful. If not, just, keep it in your back pocket. And
Yeah.
that's always a good idea.
I think it is too, and it's never as big a deal as you think it is. Like, I think so many people feel guilty for talking about their goals. They're, like, so scared of coming off as salesy that then they
Yeah.
just don't talk about it at all, but it's like, people do care more than you think. When someone shares their goals with me or what they're trying to achieve, I care, and then I'm thinking about that, and if I meet someone who can help them, then I would love to connect them with that person, like, it doesn't have to be as scary as you might think.
No, it doesn't.
People
And people, I'm
yeah,
sorry, people always think that they are going to ask for something or they're
yeah,
asking too much, but
yeah.
people like helping people.
They
It
do.
puts us in a position of authority, of power, even just knowing that we can help other people, and it
Yeah.
feels good. And there's nothing wrong with feeling good by helping other people. I think there's this idea that we should, sacrifice and all of this stuff. But I had a mentor once tell me that there's nothing wrong with doing well by doing good. You can
Mm,
make money by helping people, and that's
yeah.
perfectly acceptable. Actually, it's better than making money by hurting people. So let's do that. Right?
So it's actually the best way to
Yeah,
make
best way to
money,
make money.
right?
Yeah, it is. You're right.
Yeah, I love that. Well, yeah, I think that that's a really incredible takeaway for everyone. Just build those relationships,
Mhm.
network. I think, look at it as a benefit of freelancing that you get to meet so many amazing people. That changed my life. Like for so long, I struggled to meet like-minded people who cared about the things I cared about. Then I started freelancing and they were everywhere I looked. I just
There you
had to
go.
reach out and start the conversation. So I think it's a really beautiful part of freelancing. Yeah, so I guess we'll wrap it up there. I think we'll be coming back Dave will be coming back for part 2,
Ooh, great.
if he's interested after this conversation, but I would love to, to talk more about the logistics of running an agency for some of our more advanced freelancers and selfishly for myself. I need to get some more advice from David. So hopefully we'll be coming out with that soon as well. But thank you so much, David, for coming on. Is there anything else that you want to share before we close out here? Any way that we can support you besides if anyone listening knows about cybersecurity,
Yeah, please reach out to
please
me.
come to the concert workshop.
Well, I will just offer to be one of those people in your network. Whoever's
Mm,
listening to this, just find me on LinkedIn, David
yeah.
J. Ebner. I tell people the J is silent. That's an SEO joke. If you search David Ebner, there's a bunch of people on there. But David
Oh,
J,
that's really smart.
I'm the guy. So anyway, David J. Ebner, find me, connect with me, message me, say, hey, I heard you on the podcast. Happy to be a part of your network. And if we have a job opening, I post them all the time, so you'll probably see them. So it's a good way to find some.
Awesome. Cool. Well, hopefully people will do that. All of your socials will be linked in the show notes, and then we'll be posting this on the socials for you guys too. So I think that's all for today. Thank you again, David, for coming on, and we'll close it out there.
You're welcome. Thanks, Haley.